Well, hello everyone. This is Jon Croft, and this is Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, and I am Jon Croft, and Rebecca Croft's here. How you doing, Rebecca?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Doing great. As you know, we've had another week of figuring things out. We've got some stuff to do in our house before we can sell it. So I've got to do some stuff around the house. Small amount of construction, but nothing too major. And and I know we've had a few media experiences this week. How about you, Rebecca? Have you had any of those?
I wasn't gonna, I was thinking that I didn't have any, but this really amazing, handsome man is reading Perelandra to me every morning, and it's really good. It's so good, and it reminds me of how inspired I was by that story when I first read it.
Yep.
Perelandra is the second in the C.S. Lewis Cosmic
Cosmic Trilogy.
trilogy. So it's the book in the middle. Um,
It's the one everyone loves. It's the one everyone says is the best of the three.
yeah. Didn't you have to read it in school? Wasn't it like part of assigned reading in school?
I don't remember if that was true. I just remembered reading it because I liked reading it, actually,
Yeah.
which is rare for a kid in high school. Um,
Yeah.
but I was one of those weird kids, who was kind of off on my own, learning my own stuff,
Yeah.
and school would often bore me. So I read Homer, I read all kinds of cool classical stuff
Yeah.
that other people were like, "What? Why are you doing that?" Of course, I wouldn't really tell anybody in school because there's no point doing that. But so yeah,
Yeah.
I do think that I think it was recommended reading, something like that. But you know what? Now that I think about it, I might have written a paper on it. So it might have been required. In high school, I was in a Christian school. I was in ninth and 10th grade. I was in a Pentecostal uh private high school, and 11th and 12th, I was at a Baptist, Reformed Baptist high school. So I got both sides of that doctrinal coin
Mhm.
and got to defend both sides and attack both sides. No, I wasn't attacking anybody. But when someone from one side would attack the other, I'd be like, "Hey."
Yeah.
So I was the contrarian in the group, which annoyed everybody. Um,
Yeah, that's quite an experience. That'll influence you.
Yeah, people
Sure.
slinging around words like, "Oh, you're demon possessed" or whatever.
Yeah.
They're just uh, shooting from the hip, goo goo goo. Like this kind of stuff in Christian circles just is nonsensical. Like, well, when I did learn more reformed theology, then I understood how, as a Protestant, there is a difference between a Protestant in a very essential way between Protestant and Catholic and Orthodox, but still even not a huge difference there if an understanding of salvation is there.
Yeah.
Um, I've met Catholics who are not into a lot of Catholic doctrine, for example. They're into it because they were brought up into it, and
Yeah.
they hold to the Bible. So, I've known Catholics that way. So, and I've known Protestants who are very, I guess you could call them high church. They have a high regard of the sacraments and all those things. So we have more in common than we think, and kind of shooting from the hip at each other is not usually very useful. Which, speaking of that, by the way, this could segue us a little bit, but not in a major way. Just a brief little segue that Pope Leo, the new Pope, was elected, right, just this last week, and he apparently said some very Protestant things. He said that the Pope isn't necessarily all that, and that Catholics actually do regard Scripture as authoritative. And I was like, okay, that's 20 years of backtracking. from my perspective, I'm glad for it. Like if that continues to happen in the Catholic Church, I'll be like, hey, listen to your Pope.
Yeah,
When before I was like, I don't regard what the Pope says. And why is this? Because authority comes from Christ. So when you defend Christ, you suddenly have authority. I wonder why that happens.
yeah,
Same thing for government and families and any kind of authority. If we are in line, right, with Christ's authority, suddenly what we say has weight to it as it comes to spiritual value. So, his kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, has influence, and all power and authority is in it. So if you if you finally decide to regard scripture and put Christ as the head instead of the Pope, wow, okay. Christ is the rock. I think that's literally what he said, which makes me come to that conclusion, right? That actually it's Christ that's the rock and not the Pope, not Peter, right? So when for so long, so many Catholics I would talk to, oh yeah, Peter is the rock. I mean, its name is Peter, so he must be the rock. This kind of argument. And you're kind of like, I don't know about that. There's a lot of context to those verses. We can't forget the context. So regarding scripture, that kind of makes me, oof, that's good stuff.
yeah,
If you're going to do that. So that's another, I guess you could call that a media experience I had was reading in on Pope Leo
yeah,
and seeing that if he has wisdom to offer the world,
yeah.
um, hopefully he'll continue to go down that path, you know.
That's great. That's good news.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was just going to say one last thing about Perelandra, which is that in some ways it reminds me of George MacDonald. Not that it sounds like him at all. It's definitely its own, his own style, but it has this underlying current of God's goodness,
Hmm.
like throughout the whole story, like
Yeah.
as our
Yeah.
main character is exploring the alien landscape,
Right.
there's just this constant feeling of like that he's being protected, that he's being cared for, that everything he needs is being provided.
Yes.
And
Good
the author,
observation.
the author
Wow.
doesn't even say that. Like that's not even the words.
Yeah.
He's just busy describing everything, but
It's the
it's
tone.
the tone. Yeah.
The tone of it is it's kind of like faithful from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
There's this steady, calming peace in a lot of George MacDonald's work, such as like Princess and the Goblin or
Hmm.
At the Back of the North Wind.
Hmm.
There's this, especially his stories, I think, for kids, they're just a steady, calming piece, like a backdrop behind it that is giving you confidence in God, right?
Yeah.
And asking you to just continue to have faith in Him,
Yeah.
regardless of difficult circumstance. So that's the beginning of Perelandra, right? Where Ransom is sent off to go to Venus or Perelandra, and he knows almost nothing
Hmm.
about what he's supposed to be doing there, except it's an important role and he's going to be protected. He's going to be provided for in some way, in some cosmic way that he doesn't even know. And the Eldil obviously are will be able to be around if he needs them. And but he's also it's kind of like us, right? Sent into life. We're sent off into life to do this mission. We don't, have a directional sign every 5 minutes on what we're supposed to be doing. But there's this kind of providence behind the whole thing, right? If there's this confidence that we can put in God, that He's kind of taking care of the things that are too hard for us to take care of, the things that are above our pay grade. And so we can kind of refer to Him and defer to Him when we need some extra authority. But you know, there's this providential feeling of peace behind Perelandra. And that's one of the things I think I noticed today too, is that when reading it, it had this kind of tone of heavenly beauty and this confidence that he would be able to do something good in that situation. But also he's experiencing all these new things. Like we're still in the beginnings of the book. And he's experiencing all these new things, having all these new experiences that are totally alien to him. But he continues to like be enthralled with the beauty of this world. And it's this heavenly trust, right, that he's placing in God. And so it's kind of endearing and pretty cool, you know.
Yeah.
We don't see a lot of stories like that,
No.
you know.
No.
Perelandra is definitely a picture of heaven.
Yeah.
Um, like imagining what heaven would be like in many ways, but on a different, a totally reimagining,
Hmm.
of what constitutes heavenly experience, right?
Yeah.
So Perelandra kind of gives you a different perspective on what heaven might be like,
Yeah.
really. It's quite enthralling.
Yeah.
And he gets into the senses a lot. Like he
Mhm.
really gets into the senses. I think for Out of the Silent Planet was more social, was more of a social kind of collecting information about these different people on Malcandra. And now it feels more like natural, down to the biological level.
Yeah.
It feels like he's like soaking in all this new biology, and it feels very heavenly.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It is.
And I think if my memory serves me right, that hideous strength is very heady and intellectual, which is very different from these other two books. It's just
Hmm.
very intellectual. It's mythological. It's like about the past and the present. I'm sorry, it's about the past and the future at the same time.
Mm.
It's just like this very strange collection of thoughts that are almost not the farthest thing from modern. Um, and sometimes that's, like I said, it's a mythological past thinking, past kind like an ancient kind of thought, or it's a very futuristic thought where you're kind of like, I don't understand what's happening. This is so foreign to me, but I could see society heading in this direction,
Yeah.
you know? So the first seems like a very social kind of sociology, psychology, anthropological way of looking at things. And the second one seems just very biological, heavenly, spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
very tactile and sensual. And the third one just seems very cold, intellectual. It's got good relationships in it, good relationship stuff sometimes, or disturbing relationship stuff. And then it's also got, of course, the ancient versus the futuristic. It's just
Yeah.
very weird book in many ways.
It's very weird.
Yeah. But a lot of people love it because it's so weird, I think.
Hmm.
Some people love that.
I like how weird it is. I just, I'll be honest with you, when I read it, I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Uh, like maybe this would make more sense to me if I lived in England in the 1940s.
Yep.
I don't know. Like it's just,
Well, even then you'd probably still have to be an English professor of some
yeah,
ancient thing. Or
yeah, because
I
it's
think
like,
it's really the mythological
yeah,
gaps, because sometimes C.S. Lewis and Tolkien will have these mythological references. George MacDonald will too. Well, he'll have a mythological reference from Old Greek or Roman times. And like obviously at the back of the North Wind, right, comes from an old Greek myth about the North Wind and how they thought about the North Wind back then. And so it's kind of like a reference to heaven in some ways, right? But or this place where you can't go, or something like that, this waiting place in between heaven and earth sometimes. So it's this strange mythological kind of musings, you know. And then Lewis will just kind of in a very intellectual way, kind of reference something. And I think it's supposed to give you greater context for what he's talking about. And
Hmm.
I often miss it because I'm not really an expert on on Greek mythology. I will know some of the major stories and their themes,
Hmm.
but I almost purposefully avoid a lot of the pagan mythology and just stick with kind of the Christian kind of mythology,
Yeah.
whether it's biblical or like you know, medieval or what have you. I like that stuff quite a bit.
Legendarium.
Yeah, legendarium stuff. Yeah, I mean, understanding Catholic legends and myths really could help modern Protestants to understand myth, the idea of myth, much better because you might think that Catholics think everything is literal, and when they read a myth about an old saint, they might think, oh, yeah, he really did that. But the truth is, they know a lot of that stuff is not meant to be taken literally. They
Yeah.
just they have an interesting way of processing it, and that comes from their old understanding of myth. So the it's kind of like there's an element in the Orthodox Church like that way too, I think, where they appreciate mystery, rather they don't have to explain everything about the Godhead necessarily, um, or about all the stories of mythology. But what they do have to do is put their faith in God. Um, they recognize that the point is to put your faith in God through those stories, not to see that, not to think that Santa Claus literally gave gifts to children on midnight of Christmas Eve. Like that's not the point of that myth. So, so there's a deeper distillation, right, of these things. And I think Protestants could benefit from that understanding, because then what we could do is learn to better distill truths in myth. That's pretty important. So we tend to be, as Protestants, we tend to be way too literalistic, and I think we tend to be too materialistic, which is really quite tragic. We should be the farthest people from materialistic, if anything. But we're often too utilitarian, pragmatic, and materialistic, you know. And so I think that's kind of unhelpful, as especially as it comes to the arts and storytelling. So, but yeah, Perelandra is great. I'm enjoying it. I'm also reading This Present Darkness again. It was years ago that I read that book, probably in
Yeah.
the 90s. Um, that's actually a really fun book. I forgot how fun it is.
Yeah.
And it's got like spiritual warfare stuff in it that people today don't even talk about much. It's really valuable because it emphasizes the value and importance of prayer,
Yeah.
like above many other Christian disciplines. It values prayer, and I think that's something that we often as Christians neglect is just our prayer life. Whether, I think today we are rediscovering the Bible, I think, in our society, which is really good. And I think probably 10 years ago, we weren't caring about the Bible when we were caring about other things like social issues or what have you. And then before that, I think we were caring about prayer a lot at the time of This Present Darkness. I think people understood that that was a important value. Um, and so it's really got me thinking about some of those issues, you know. And This Present Darkness actually feels very prescient for today in many ways. I'm enjoying it. I think I'm like 8 chapters in now. It's good.
That's awesome.
To our major topics, I guess I have two of them, right? I put two articles out this week. So one of them, let me share. Here is Media Moses. As you can see, this story in the middle here, the Last Rodeo just came out, and I'll talk about this other story after that. So this important story, the Last Rodeo hits theaters. We check the Wokometer. The Wokometer, by the way, is on the website, which does ratings. I don't use all Hollywood's rating systems because many of them are just a waste of time. You're going to get a lot of subjective thinkers who just kind of complain about movies and they don't really think in an objective way about the craft. Worth It or Woke is the website. So when you go there, they give a full ratings breakdown of a movie. The Last Rodeo gets a B overall grade. But the fun thing about Worth It or Woke is the Wokeometer, which is this guy down here. It's you could be woke or you could be based. And this movie is 100% based. So you want to go to this article about The Last Rodeo, you will find the links to see the ratings and the reviews of this film. Rotten Tomatoes only at the time gave it only a 71%, but that was before the general public hit it. I wonder what it is over there now, actually. Why don't I check it, actually? I have not even checked this. I think it would be a good idea to do. Let's see what it says. Oh, there's still no verified ratings, which I find curious because it came out last night. Audience reviews. Oh, all audience. There we go. But it's not, look at this. Almost all 4 or 5 stars for the audience rating. Look at that. Oh my goodness. This is the audience rating. See, I had not even checked this. This is incredible. Look at all those um, reviews.
That's
All
all.
of them are like 4 or 5 stars, 5 stars quite often. See, this is what you get when you go to all audience. What they
Mhm.
do is they do verified audience. There's still a lot of 4 or 5 ratings there, but did they give you the final rating of that? I don't think so. So, it's doing fairly well there as well. I think it was 71, but I don't know, that's not, it should be higher than that. I mean, did you see that? I mean, almost all of them were 4 or 5 stars. Look at that.
That's amazing.
That's like at least 90%.
Yeah.
There's one that's down. That's one out of, oh, there's two. Two out of maybe 50 reviews. That's not a 70%. That's more like a 90% to 95%. Um, so this is what people have been saying about Rotten Tomatoes is that they're not really good with being objective, that they kind of hide stuff they don't like. If they don't want to see that, then they find ways of hiding it. Back to the story. So, The Last Rodeo, what I tend to do with these films, I wrote this article before I saw it. So when I say review, because this is kind of a review, what I mean is other people's reviews. So I'm giving you a list so that it's more objective, right? I'm giving you a list of reviews that I think are good reviews because why? They're reviewing based on the correct criteria. They're not reviewing the way a lot of other people in Hollywood review, which is just based on the craft. But I talk about the different standards of reviews here, worldview, craftsmanship here. And so if you want to hear my views on what is a good review or how should we be reviewing stuff, there's some of that. I got a good article on here from World News Group, and they're pretty good. Christian news organization. Then I have a little interview here. But one thing I noticed is that there was not a lot of reviews from my class, from the typical people that I look at for reviews. And that's
Yeah.
really a shame. We should be reviewing these kinds of films every time they come out, not letting them fall between the cracks. Like Hollywood and Toto doesn't review it. Movie Guide, by the way, Movie Guide has a tendency of just telling you the cultural implications, any warnings for kids, etc. Um, but it won't go into the craftsmanship of it, which I think is kind of sad. That movie guy doesn't tend to go into the craftsmanship of it. Um, Plugged In will go into both, but they tend to only give you a small content warning thing, which isn't always helpful. And then their reviews can be overlong. Not to criticize Plugged In, I like Plugged In quite a bit, but I had read this World News Group, their review, and I was really impressed with it. It wasn't too long. It didn't have any content warnings, but it didn't need to because it was written so well. It explained the content warnings very well in the review itself. Those are the reviews I remember reading when I was younger. These kind of reviews, I think they're quite good. We've gotten used to this kind of Rotten Tomato rating system thing, which often is just not a complete picture of a film. Um, Often obviously you don't want to give a quote complete picture with spoilers, right? That's just the brilliance of good review writing. You've got to be able to do all these things at once, and that gives it to give a complete picture of a story and its consider and the considerations involved with making it and the storytelling and the rating systems without without boring people and without being too technical and also without being too personally opinionated either. So it's a real balancing act, and some people can do it really well. I liked this one from World, but I liked a lot of these too. It's very helpful. I tend to go to YouTube reviews, and by the way, Critic List doesn't have any reviews on it, which is sad because I like Critic List. I don't always go there, but they are kind of like I think trying to grow like Rotten Tomatoes and become like Rotten Tomatoes, where they'll have an aggregator of reviews, like many different reviewers on there. That's pretty cool. And of course, Worth It or Woke does that. They have many different reviews on there, and then they give you a Wokeometer. You can vote. If you're a subscriber on there, you can vote on the Wokeometer. So that's pretty cool. But a lot of my favorite guys, like The Collision, didn't review it. That's kind of sad because it's actually a fairly decent film. And I guess I could talk about it a little bit. First of all, it's why I wanted to call this episode Masculine Storytelling. The thing is, though, this film isn't fully there yet. It's not, I wouldn't describe it as masculine storytelling. I actually consider people like Scorsese, Terrence Malick, um, you know, obviously people like Tarantino. A lot of these people are very masculine storytellers. They're very kinetic. They're very action oriented. They show they don't tell. Um, they're about a plot thrusting forward so that you are engaged, right, with what the character's going through. It's very in the moment, but there also can be a lot of heady and intellectual themes. The ultimate kind of like era, I think, for masculine filmmaking was the 80s. And that's because of so many action films. There was also a lot of horror films. I don't consider horror inherently masculine, but it does often have a lot of masculine themes in it. But action, I definitely consider inherently masculine.
Can you
Uh,
give a quick synopsis of the movie Last Rodeo?
yes. So thanks for getting me back on track. The Last Rodeo is about a grandfather, a daughter, and a grandson. And so he is living his grandson is living his life, uh, and and then it's established well in the beginning that the grandfather was a famous rodeo star, but he also broke his neck and went into retirement. And so, and then the son is kind of like, I think you could come back and become a great rodeo star again. And then he ends up having a conversation with the mother, and the mother's like dead set against this. And some of this is in the trailer, sure. She's dead set against this. Why? Because you learn later, or you can learn it in the trailer, that she had to nurse him to health. And but what you do learn later about that is that he was not altogether a good guy during this whole process of being nursed to health. He was often difficult, hard to manage, a drinker, would get into fights, and so not a very good role model during all this time. And I think because he was retired, he was struggling through that, and that's why he got into all this trouble. Um, and so, now that there's more peace in the family, I guess the idea comes back as this question, right? But it's this honest question that's not too in your face, right? It's just kind of there. And then what happens? The son, the grandson gets put in the hospital, and they find a brain tumor while he's in there. So of course they're like, we're gonna have to operate. This is gonna cost so much money, and your health insurance will not cover it, which is typical what you see today. Health insurance has never been solved. So this is a difficult conundrum for everyone today in this country, and we all know it. So that you could call that the social issue that's in the movie is people who cannot survive this kind of debilitating illness because health insurance doesn't cover them. But also there's the bigger, more important themes, which are the family dynamics there. You learn later on, right, that the mother, as a result of all this, didn't get to kind of live her life. She didn't even get to get a high school degree, diploma. She was taking care of her dad and also being a little bit of a rodeo helper herself. So, this sideswiped her whole life. And so you can kind of understand why she's a bit bitter about it. So, of course, what happens, as you know, well, if you've seen the trailer, he decides to come back for one last rodeo in order to win this prize, right? And beat this young upstart. So that he becomes like the villain of the story where they're kind of battling it out. But there are some really good themes here of, can you, as an old kind of like previously famous person, get back your old glory? And so there's something for that person, this older generation. There's something for that in this movie. And I think that was I'm not that old, but I felt it. I felt that theme in it. And I also felt like that mother in many ways, not having lived your life when you're having to deal with kind of the drama in life that comes along and sideswipes you, and wondering when your life's going to start. Um, and then there's the grandson who doesn't even get to start barely anything in his life is sideswiped. So a lot of stuff depends on what is this old guy going to do, and he's feeling that pressure. And so, some of it's like glory days stuff. Some of that stuff I find kind of, not very useful, kind of the beating your chest thing. Because, when you see people doing that in real life, it's, I think, more authentic. And then, unless they're on some kind of drug. But if you see it in a movie, it really seems inauthentic. It's like a montage. I mean, we all know what these montages are there to do, to over glorify that situation. You know,
To save time, to
it's a
tell a
montage.
story in a shorter period of time.
Yes, exactly. Let's just put this glory together for you so you can experience it in 2 minutes. Uh, wow. How much glory is that? That's beautiful. So it's funny in that way. well, I shouldn't say it's funny. It's not. It's often a very serious film, but there's a few fun jokes. Probably mostly for the old timers. Um, but there is something about this film that's striving to understand and deal with men's issues. And it's almost like they're kind of on the outskirts of it, like where it's just kind of a trope. It's a bit tropish, which faith-based film can do that a lot. It's rely on faith-based tropes. Um, so it has some of these tropes, but it really does lean into the craftsmanship more than 90% of faith-based films. So I would even caution about calling it faith-based. If it is a faith-based film, it's it's like the shadow of a faith-based film. It's like the last remnants that you're seeing of faith-based genre dying. And I just find that really refreshing. So even though you could call this a faith-based film, I think if you don't like faith-based films, you might get something out of this film because you're going to feel some of the emanating ghostliness of faith-based film leaving the body. And it's going to feel a little bit fresh to feel that. A lot of that is just the well-intentioned desire to make a film for the men, because I think that's such a rare thing today. You'll probably see 1 out of 20 films be for men now. It's such a rare, I guess that's what, 5%. It's a rare sight to see films for men because even if you see like a Hollywood action film, you have feminism in that film generally. And oftentimes it's the women kicking butt, right? So that's, you know, those themes kind of are in your face in Hollywood films. So, so yeah, I don't tend to watch Hollywood films anymore now. Instead, I look for these kind of refreshing moments where whether it's the faith-based industry or conservative film or some of these other outfits, whether it's Angel Studios or whoever, and they're trying to come in and make a difference, right? And change kind of the outlook or change the surface of what Hollywood looks like now and coming in from the outside. So I really find that to be the most refreshing thing. I don't tend to watch that much traditional media anymore. I will watch YouTube and I will watch this kind of stuff. And so it gives I don't feel like I have to take a shower then every time I watch something, which is nice. Uh, So yeah, I would see it if you are into these masculine themes, but also you want to see faith-based film kind of start to kind of wane away, and you're seeing the end stages of that genre. And so there is some of that feeling in it, some of that tone. I think there is a common complaint about this film, which is that it's a bit overlong. I think that's definitely true. It is about 2 hours which a film like this could have easily been an hour and 40 minutes, something like that. That was one misstep, but I think that they just had sweet moments in it and they wanted to keep a lot of those sweet moments in it. And so that those lengthy sweet moments made it feel more faith-based, just a little bit more saccharine. But I really did actually like the rodeo moments. They were exhilarating. It really made you feel like it would be easy to die in that situation. It was a fascinating cultural view of cowboy life, right?
Yeah, even
Um,
in the trailer, it felt that way. It
yeah,
was like, ooh.
yeah. Well, there's an interview with John Avnet, the director, and he talked about his how his way into this film was actually those scenes. It was understanding that to really show riding a bull, you have to show it a little bit from the perspective of the rider, which really meant not seeing everything. It really meant obscuring your view and by doing that, adding to kind of the chaos of that moment where you're feeling the kind of the kinetic energy of that bull coming at you. And that's a lot more exhilarating than just a wide shot or something. of this
Yeah.
thing happening. You really feel it a lot more. And so when you see like Neil McDonough and and he's taken off his shirt because he's like bruised all over after getting knocked off this bull, you're like, ooh, you really do wince. You're like, ouch. So they did that part really well. And you were really feeling kind of this self-sacrificial love that was coming in that movie as it comes to the theme of him being willing for his body to be beat up by these multiple bulls so he could try to help his grandson
Mm.
survive. That's a powerful theme that you just, that's probably one of the most masculine themes you can get, because that's a Christ-like act.
Mhm.
And so I think that speaks to everybody, men and women and kids. It's it, you know, it's good to see someone who's actually a hero trying to do their best to save a life and sacrificing their own life for the sake of that person.
Yeah.
And not even just, oh, I might get shot and die in a second, but oh, I might get beat up by a bull's hoof. Like I might get my neck broken
Mhm.
and suffer for years because of this. That's a different kind of suffering. So there's something beautiful about that, that you could say that's really what masculine films are about. If you could sum up what masculine films are about, it's kind of, in a biblical sense, following Christ as a patriarch and saying, follow me, but I also make mistakes sometimes, right? So you're not Christ yourself, you are a human, but the beauty in that is, there's a broken piece of glass and it you can see Christ through that glass. It's not perfect. It is shattered and broken, but it also has its own beauty because of that, right? Its own different, unique beauty. So there's something about that self-sacrificial love that fathers have. And so when Christ describes kind of the job of men, it's to do that. It's to give your body for your wife and to give your body for your children to protect them, provide for them, you know, and then teach them the really tough lessons that helps them understand that whole process as they get older. Why do they do that? And therefore, and then eventually, why do we follow Christ, right? Because kids have to understand that they might look up to their dad and be like, that person's a hero. And then as soon as they fail utterly at something, or as soon as they end up not being a good teacher or a good father, then they can lose hope. Kids, they can put so much, I think, reliance upon their fathers when they see them as a hero. And then once that illusion is shattered, right? They're actually not a godlike superhero. What do you do with that? So fathers have to also teach that they are not Christ themselves, that they're not a superhero themselves. All they can do is the best they can do, right? In following in Christ's footsteps. But they're going to fail at some point. And so it's really about them saying, listen, the point isn't for you to follow me ultimately, it's to follow Christ ultimately, right? So there's this point at which, I've used this analogy of the mirror, right? We're mirroring Christ, and they think that they're seeing us. They think that they're seeing us, but really they're seeing Christ in the mirror. And so at a certain point, you gotta be like, I'm just me. This was Christ. Like that's actually Christ in the mirror. And so there's beauty to that, but you know, uh, understanding patriarchy is understanding the hierarchy of authority. Fathers are supposed to be given this measure of respect, and respect just has to do with what you're there to do, what your purpose is. And so when kids respect a father, they're respecting his job and the fact that he's doing his job well, which is to mirror Christ. Yeah, we hold authority, and that the only reason we can hold any true authority is if we are, again, mirroring Christ. We're upholding Christ's laws, we're upholding his uh his authority in our families. And where we're doing that, we deserve respect. And where we're failing in that, right, it's a discussion, and it's, oh, well, what did I get wrong? Why did I do that? Right? You're having this very human moment, and you get back on the horse. You don't give up, right? And you don't despair and say, well, my father is not a good father anymore. No, your father's just human, right? So you have to kind of extend some mercy and kindness, even to your own dad. So there's big lessons in that. And moms are beautiful when they can navigate all of the complexity of that, because it's moms have a hard job being kind of like a middleman between their kids and their dad sometimes. You know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I think I was talking about yesterday, I think, with the kids. I was like, no, this morning, I think I was talking about how I'm like a lawman in the home. And so when the laws are being broken, I show up and I go, hey, you're breaking the law. Mommies, mommies are different. Mommies teach wisdom, and they teach what wise living is about, and kindness and mercy and sweetness. And so the kids have a choice. Are they going to listen to moms when mom is being sweet and merciful and kind? Or are they going to consider that being a pushover or something? Like, oh, I'm not going to listen to that. I don't need to listen to mommy. And then you're waiting for dad to show up, right? You want dad to show up so he could school you, you know, and be a little more severe, so you'll actually follow the law. And so I was saying, well, the truth is, as you grow up, if kids continue to not follow their parents, right, what happens is they become criminals or something, or at least metaphorically in a way, right? They become lawbreakers. And a lot of the reason that we have criminals is because they didn't have a father who was the example of a lawman in the home, laying down the law. And so when they don't have a father, they miss that father. They literally kind of want the lawman around. They're kind of longing for that moment where they get caught and, oh man, I got caught. Now God's going to prove to me that justice exists. That's kind of comforting in some way, you know? So they don't mind rubbing elbows in that world as much, because they kind of miss their dads. They didn't have a dad. They didn't get that lawman, right? To give them kind of some understanding of the consequences of being a lawbreaker, and not give them the opportunity, right, to experience mom's grace and beauty and mercy. Because if they just had a single mom or something, that mom's got to play both roles, and she's going to end up doing both of those roles, mm, kind of mediocrely. Um, when you have to do that, right? When you have to play both roles, you kind of end up doing both of them in a mediocre way instead of excelling, right? As the mom in the mom role or the dad role, right? So you have a mom and dad, you get two people excelling at the mom and dad role. And the kids can then choose what would I rather listen to wisdom, like the proverbial wisdom, right? Or would I rather get the law coming down on me? Sometimes they want dad, you know? And so I'm here to do that for them. But like, it's good when you have entertainment, right, that shows those roles, that shows what these kind of cultural, traditional cultural roles are in the family, right? Because you don't always see that these days. But yeah, I quite enjoyed The Last Rodeo. It's not like an amazing film. I probably would rate it like, I don't know, like a 75%, something like that. Maybe 80%. It gets a lot of points in my book though for changing culture. So it's kind of like when Hollywood says this is a very important film. That's how you know the film's not very good, but it has great cultural messaging, right? And so these are we need more of these kinds of films. Um, but I do, but you know, and I'm quite kind in many ways to Angel and these more Christian and conservative players on the outside of Hollywood. I'm understanding to what the plight is that they are in. I thought I would actually reference a friend of mine, Ryder the Omniscient. I have to give him some kudos. Good job, Ryder, because he has another great video that he put out. Let's see if I can share this actually. His video is called Dear Christian Filmmaker, Stop Forcing the Gospel into Every Scene. So
I'll show you one Christian film that actually nails it. Most Christian artists are mistaken in thinking that being a good Christian means putting Bible verses and references to Jesus in every story they write. Not only is that not how good stories are written, but it's counterintuitive and undermines our faith. And I'll explain later why this approach isn't just bad storytelling. It might actually be pushing people away from Christ. First, we have to define what I mean by preaching. If you're a
and
Christian
so
filmmaker,
he goes into the faith-based genre a little bit. He's done this with a few different videos he's put out, but he has a little different angle on each one, and he really explains more in this video, as well as this other video he put out, this one, 19 Brutal Lessons.
I'm a Christian musician and filmmaker, and in a few days, I'll be 19 years old. As I look back, I realize my journey hasn't just been about building skills.
So he
It
goes
has been building
through
someone's opinion.
he goes through all these different lessons of how to be a better filmmaker, better Christian filmmaker. He has lessons like comparison kills momentum, like comparing yourself to others. Perfectionism is procrastination. That's a really good lesson. I've done that. I'm guilty of that so often because I'm one of those perfectionists. Overcoming fear of rejection. I think we can all learn from that. Start small, build big. That is such an important lesson. Starting small and building big, that it's like my gospel right now with for Christian filmmakers. It's like telling Christian filmmakers, stop trying to make a big film, make a bunch of small films right now, and then wrap it into something larger later. Um, and the reason it's so important to me is because I was trying to do that for like a decade in Hollywood, locally where I'm at now in Florida, but also in Hollywood. I was trying to make these bigger films, and I didn't understand really that I needed to start small. I was always thinking big, right? Um, because they encourage you to think big, right? Here's another one. Hard work beats talent, which is so true. I think people will tell you that with success stories all the time. It's the people who work hard that beat the talented people every day. Um, Seek authenticity over approval. That's a great lesson for today. It's such an important lesson for today. I was also guilty of that in Hollywood, seeking approval in Hollywood instead of authenticity. Um, you'll be misunderstood. Yep, that's just going to happen. That's a good lesson online, just being online with people. Um, then stop letting fear control you. Oh yes, oh yes. God's number one principle for success. I don't remember what that was. I think it had to do with your mission or something. I don't remember what it was, but it was really good. He's got great stuff in here. I would actually, I don't know, I think I even like this one better than his new one because it's just 19 brutal lessons, great stuff. I just have to give him kudos for putting out another great video, and he's doing great stuff. I plan on doing another interview with him soon. We just had to get a lot of stuff done with our move and figuring out what we're going to do.
That looked like a great that was a great video.
It is. It's really great. It's a lot of fun too. Because a lot of the stuff he says, you're kind of like, of course, because everybody, almost everybody can't stand faith-based film. So we all know there's something wrong with it. I shouldn't say can't stand. I mean, a lot of it would just like, if you're a Christian, you're kind of like, well, it's not perfect. It can improve, but I can see the good intentions in trying to
Yeah.
make these films. But I think we all know deep down that this is not art. We know that there's some kind of anemic quality to our filmmakers. We don't know why. Often we have a difficulty with being willing to admit some fault in this as Christians, ourselves. You know, that we participate in the culture in the wrong way, for example. Maybe there's a antagonism that we have with the culture instead of kind of working in the culture to do something good and beneficial to all people. We instead kind of antagonize and react to the culture, which is not really very effective. You know, authenticity is part of that, I think, just being authentic. But he's got some really important things to say there because, you know, just speaking about masculine films the way we're doing tonight and The Last Rodeo, I try to be very kind to faith-based media, but I think one of the points that Ryder brings up is that we have to kind of really transcend faith-based media. And you do that not by kind of reacting to the reaction, right? Like, oh, I have to change along with this change with faith-based media. No, you have to be an authentic creator who's more of an artist. So that's kind of a lot of his point is being an authentic artist. What does that really mean? And that we've really in the Christian world kind of been out of touch with the reality of what authentic being an authentic artist really is. There's something that many people like Ryder are starting to figure out in the Christian community, which is that Christians actually make great artists. We actually are really good artists, philosophically speaking. One of the realizations about that too is that Christians, especially Protestants, we have a work ethic, right? Art really is about craftsmanship, and craftsmanship really is about just hard work, repetition, doing the same thing over and over. I have a past episode about the Protestant work ethic where I think of it as Protestant monasticism. And I think that's a really important perspective on Protestantism that I think we should embrace because there was something beautiful about the Reformation as it comes to it forming new things like America, it forming new ways of thinking about government, new ways of thinking about programs in society, you know, like abolition of slavery, like many other movements that have changed society for the better. Some of them not so much, some of them definitely good. Sometimes we go a little far, right? Like, for example, prohibition. We went a little far with prohibition. Or feminism. We went a little far with feminism. So there are things that Protestants have done that are good. I think in what I'm talking about now, obviously, is the culture and art. I think the more people that kind of get what he's trying to say here about finding your artistic voice as a Christian, the more like a real serious movement could occur, right? On the level of Christendom's beautiful churches. Like it could be on that level where we're talking about art that can change the world, like that kind of art. But we really have to change as it comes to like in the West, we've had this weakness of in our academic thinking. We have a one way or the highway kind of thinking. And that's not good for art. Speaking of which, also with art, journalism too. Christians would make great journalists because it's all about truth. It's all about finding the truth. You're not there to make money. You're not there to be, line your pocket. You're there to improve the community through storytelling that has relevant facts that could improve society. That's so, I mean, my goodness. I can't think of, I almost can't think of a profession that could be more beneficial in the hands of a Christian, but a journalist. Like, you know what I mean? Like a journalist who's doing really good work, if that person is really applying the ethic towards it in a powerful way, man, what a difference they could make. The problem is the journalism outlets that we see in the world just don't seem to care about all that stuff, changing the world for the better. They're really loud with their claims that they are. They're just loud and obnoxious with all those claims, and then they're doing nothing. So, yeah, that's another group of people I would love to see more of, Christian journalists. The other subject I think I was going to talk about, now that I remember, is about the Daily Wire. It's not a huge deal, or maybe it is. That's the problem, is we have had no confirmation from the Daily Wire that this is happening, but the Hollywood Reporter, which in by Hollywood standards is a highly reputable publication, they've announced that there's a new CEO in place of Jeremy Boring, which is Mike Richards, I believe his name, the former Jeopardy host who was canceled for inappropriate comments like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Yeah, and there's even a video of Matt Walsh kind of like defending Mike Richards when being canceled. So the Hollywood Reporter has reported now that he is the new CEO of the Daily Wire, and the Daily Wire has been saying nothing. So, again, I don't know if this is confirmation of my theories about the Daily Wire, or if it's actually confirmation that they really are just a mess over there. And I don't know what to tell you. Uh, you know, that there's other evidences that could prop up my theory. Now, if you don't know about my theory about the Daily Wire and Jeremy Boring, I'll just let you know. And you could watch I think it's my previous two podcasts about making conservative art, and the newer one as well, Parallel Hollywood, um, where I discuss the fact that there are rumblings behind the scenes that the people not Jeremy Boring, but the people who work with Jeremy Boring to make films under Bonfire Legends banner, under like Ryan Whitaker, like Ken Carpenter, like of course Dallas Sanier, and this other Western director, Travis Mills, I believe is his name. They are all working on projects together that are Westerns and action movies, and which is right down Daily Wire's, avenue, but yet nobody has made announcements that these are official Daily Wire projects. So, and then now there's a new one, a big one, an article I wrote about an upcoming John Rambo movie, a
Oh yeah.
prequel to Rambo. There's no word yet on if Stallone is going to be part of this. I'm sure he's had to sign off as, I believe, one of the executive producers of Millennium Media, which is the owner of this property. So they have had to made a deal with Dallas Sanier. I don't know if it's with Bonfire Legend because he could work separately outside of Bonfire Legend. But he is He's one of the producers on this project. Um, and as we know, Sylvester Stallone is one of the three top conservative ambassadors to Hollywood that Trump has appointed. So it's not like Sylvester Stallone is going to stop working with conservatives at this time. He's probably going to press in to working with more conservatives. And what outfit is more conservative than Bonfire Legend and Daily Wire right now as it comes to filmmaking? Like, I don't think you can get more conservative and yet also Hollywood quality, Hollywood level, except maybe if you were to go to like Mel Gibson or something. He's probably the only other example that would be Hollywood level, right? Hollywood quality. I mean, people say Daily Wire is not high quality. This is just not true. This is silly. I mean, a lot of the stuff that they've acquired, right, for their platform was made in Hollywood and then acquired. It's funny how this works. Oh, as soon as the Daily Wire acquires it, it's not Hollywood quality anymore. Run, Hide, Fight, their first one. This was not made by them. It was made by somebody else, and they had just acquired it to distribute it. And it's perfectly Hollywood level quality film. But people will, of course, say that they don't like it because it's conservative. And the same thing actually happened with The Sound of Freedom, Angel's Sound of Freedom film. It was made in Hollywood and it was Hollywood quality. And then as soon as Angel is distributing it and they find out what it's about, right now Hollywood doesn't like it anymore. So we know why this is. We know what they're really thinking about. And it's the ideology, right? So I think what we're seeing here is 3 or 4 conservative films being made at the same time. And by these conservative filmmakers to create a groundswell of films for the Daily Wire to release theatrically, potentially. Some of them potentially theatrically, some of them on the platform. And I believe that they're going to be branding a new platform that Jeremy Boring will probably be heading up, which is going to be the more like, um, you know, rated PG-13, rated R kind of film, more adult film, not bent key. Is my point, right? It's not bent key made for kids. It's made for adults, and it's exciting. It's action movies, stuff like this. Which, as you know, I've talked about this. One of the kinds of films we need more of now is like the Dirty Harry westerns. These are very masculine films. They're about man wielding law in his own hands, taking um taking the law into his own hands, living out in nature, trying to survive, giving of himself, being self-sacrificial, and very kinetic, action-oriented films, right? But often also dealing with lawlessness. That's a lot of these themes, right? So that's the people who worked, for example, people who worked on Dirty Harry and those films would not say that they are conservatives. In fact, they'd probably say the opposite, and that the villain was a conservative. But when you look at when you look at it a little more deeply, you're like, I don't know. I don't know if you keep saying that word, but I don't know if you think you know what that word means. Uh, and funny enough, I think that that was kind of covered when if you look at some of the interviews and stuff when they made it, Dirty Harry, they made claims that, oh, this was not related to this other thing. But I think if you look closely, it actually was related to real cases of liberals and leftists doing crazy things. And so this film was partly inspired by the need for a lawman to put these people down, right? And take law and order into their hands. So the 70s was a time similar to our own when there was a lot of bad actors on the left, and they were actually engaged in terrorism against the general population. And so Dirty Harry was kind of an example against the serial killer type terrorist, right? You could say a modern Western, right? Of course, Clint Eastwood was perfect for that role. He was great in the Western, in the kind of the deconstructed Westerns. And so my belief is that Jeremy Boring is actually trying to start a new branded platform for conservative entertainment that does these kinds of films, Westerns, action movies, Law and Order kind of stuff. And that, I mean, if this is true, right? And I think it is, the fact that they have people like Stallone, the fact that they have people like, if it is a fact, right? I'm saying if, the fact that if this is true, they would have people like Stallone, they would have people like Armie Hammer, they would have people like Thomas Jane, um, they would have people like the former the Flint movie, which Ryan Whitaker is directing, who was a co-director on Pendragon Cycle. If there was a groundswell of these kinds of films all at the same time and they released this platform, it could really make a difference in Hollywood. So this is my belief is that, and it's because I believe that Jeremy Boring is not a moron. Okay. I don't think he's, I don't think he's a dummy. And I think he's gotten to this position by being smarter than what we think he is. And I don't think it makes sense for people like him to just drop off the edge of the world the way it looks like he's done. I really don't think that's in his character. In other words, I think he really is working hard on some big project. And when you look at the kind of stuff that the guys who have worked with the Daily Wire are working on, they are digging into filmmaking and they're digging into all this same kind of film. I think they're starting a new platform.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like, well, there was a platform, I don't remember what this little streaming service, and it had like a bunch of cool Western films on it. It's like Tubi or something, right? It was like that platform. And it had a bunch of cool old Westerns on it. It's almost like they're trying to make that except modern new movies, right? That could hit theaters. And they're at the level of these old classic like John Wayne pictures. My belief is that they're trying to do that because that would make sense. That would actually make sense. So, and also let's not forget, like, sure, there's Pendragon Cycle, but they've been done with that for a while, guys. They've been done with that so what could Jeremy Boring be doing? It's not just Pendragon Cycle, right? I was following all their behind the scenes. They are probably almost completely done with that. And the parts that they're not done with, they don't need Jeremy Boring for. That's editing and visual effects and stuff. So he's working on something else. He's got an administrative ability, right? And his administrative talents, I think, are going to be served making something like he did with BentKey, making another platform. And guess what? It's not just streaming. This is probably why it's so much more difficult because he's making, I think, a distribution studio like a Hollywood studio where some of their stuff gets released on streaming and some of it gets released full on theaters release. So that's why they learned marketing for theaters with Sound of Hope. That's why they released Matt Walsh's film in theaters, which was a documentary and did very well for documentaries. This is going to give them a shot of confidence, right? That they've done these things before. They're working towards that, guys. So, this last article I did, look at this big, beautiful face of Stallone. Could John Rambo origin story be the next Daily Wire project? I say it's true. We have no news on Jeremy Boring, so this may be too much to hope for. But as I laid out to you already, um, you know, there's a lot of evidence here, maybe circumstantial evidence, that he's doing something behind the scenes. Considering how incredible it would be if Dallas Sonnier announced that Bonfire Legends John Rambo would end up distributed by Daily Wire's own entertainment platform, we hope this will be the case. If you look at just how many films Bonfire Legend has made, which is Dallas Sonnier's platform, while noting just how many of them end up on the Daily Wire's platform, you might be surprised to realize that only 2 or 3 titles out of the 62 titles Bonfire Legend has made have not made it on DW. That means 60 of them, 59 or 60 of them out of 62 end up on the Daily Wire's platform. So if this is a Bonfire Legend picture, and it very well might be, it might end up on Daily Wire. And I don't mean just on their streamer, I mean theatrical. So they might end up distributing John Rambo. So as they say, nothing is over, right?
It's over. Nothing is over.
That's right. Nothing is over, guys. Nothing is over. So check out those articles. I'm glad we got a good masculine film out from Angel Studios. And my belief is that Daily Wire is going to be putting out what are the 3 films right now? Flint, like I mentioned, Ryan Whitaker is directing, who's a co-director on Pendragon Cycle. Frontier Crucible, starring Armie Hammer, and Thomas Jane, is a Western action movie coming out soon. Dallas
And
Sonnier is attached to that as well. And John Rambo, also Dallas Sonnier, attached to that as well as a producer. So they're just withholding Jeremy Bory's name on these projects, I think, right? Because they want to unveil at some point that this is a Daily Wire thing going on. So and they might rebrand it, right? It might not be like Daily Wire Plus. It might be like, here's our new studio, right? And this is what Jeremy Boring's been working on, this new project. A rebranding would be smart. And as I've stated in the past, a lot of what held Daily Wire back in their entertainment efforts was the fact that they had the name Daily Wire attached to their work, right? Because everyone's going to associate their politics with their entertainment. And the name Daily Wire says politics to people. Right? This is just how people think. It's what branding is, it's what it's for. So a whole package of thoughts come with the name Daily Wire. And so a smart thing to do would be to separate from Daily Wire as it comes to your branding, right? Still could be the same people working on it, but they've got a new mission. And maybe that mission is to bring you a conservative flavor of Western and action and maybe sci-fi and fantasy, who knows, to the public, like straight to the public through theaters, right? So that's kind of exciting, I think. I have no confirmation on this, right? I just see little rumblings of things. I see the fact that Daily Wire is opening an office in DC for news. This could separate their work from in Nashville from the DC efforts. Like I see all these things, right, happening behind the scenes, and I'm wondering, why is this happening? Well, it's not just that Daily Wire is growing, right? It's that they're transforming, I think. So I think that would be the smart thing to do. Anyway, that's what I would be doing. So that's my theory on that, you guys. And there's probably more I could say on masculine films, but I think you get the gist, right? I talked about patriarchal thinking, mirroring Christ. I talked about the kind of like how masculine films tend to be. They tend to be very kinetic, right? So there's the craftsmanship of them. And then there's the themes. The themes tend to be about men's issues. They tend to be about fatherhood. They tend to be about self-sacrifice and law and order and things like this. So we haven't had this a lot. We've had instead a lot of kind of feminized Hollywood films, which is kind of a bastardization of maleness in many ways. It's not really about women. It's not really about men. It's kind of about this kind of like women taking men's roles, which is really what modern feminism is all about. Um, and so there's just that bastardization of the roles. And so Hollywood has become that, right? It's no longer like authentically male or authentically female. And so in order to really do masculine films well, you have to understand that you have to actually find authentic men, not these kind of girly men from Hollywood, um, and not these feminized men who are so concerned about their image, right? How they appear before others. And instead they're just trying to live as a man before God, right? They fear God, they don't fear you, right? They don't fear other men. That's a lot of masculine energy there, right? You fear God, you don't fear other men. That's what we need to see in society, like in general in society. If we saw a lot more of that, I fear God, I don't fear men, you're going to see a lot more masculine energy films. So, and we need more of that, by the way, too, in faith-based film as well, not just in conservative film. We need to see a lot more of that in faith-based film. We had to criticize that movie, The Forge, a little while back because it had so much. It's kind of like women trying to speak for men in that film and trying to like encourage men to step up or whatever they say in the church now. Ryder the Omniscient also gave some good advice there. And so I hope we bring that with us when we're making great stuff in the future. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Where can people find you, Rebecca?
People can find me on Substack and uh, and on YouTube as well. Where can people find you?
Same. Yeah, I'm on YouTube, of course, and here. And I'm also on X, right? At the Media Moses and at John Edward Croft. And here on YouTube, I'm at Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft. And you can find my writing on MediaMoses.com. So, hope you guys have a great weekend and stand up for masculine films. Have a great weekend, you guys, and ciao.